Imagine the sound of victory drums echoing through the hills. The dust of the battlefield still hangs in the air, and the people of Israel celebrate, knowing they've been delivered from their enemies. But as Jephthah approaches his home, the joyful sound fades, replaced by the slow, heavy footsteps of a man burdened by an unspeakable vow. His heart races, not from the glory of battle, but from the fear of what awaits. The door swings open, and his only daughter, radiant and full of joy, runs out to greet him. The drums of victory are silenced by the weight of a promise that will change everything. This is the story of Jephthah, a leader, a warrior, and a father faced with a vow that would cost him dearly. What does this story mean for us today? Stay with us as we uncover the forgotten sacrifice of Jephthah and the lesson that echoes through time. Jephthah was a man often overlooked in biblical narratives, yet his story holds profound lessons. He was the son of Gilead, born to a prostitute, which led to him being rejected by his family. His half-brothers drove him away, seeing him as an illegitimate child with no right to their inheritance. Jephthah's early life was marked by exclusion and hardship, but it was these very challenges that shaped his leadership and character. His story reveals how God can use even the most unlikely individuals for his purposes. Despite being cast out, Jephthah didn't remain defeated. He gathered a band of outcasts and became a mighty warrior, known for his strength and tactical brilliance. This new life in the wilderness, surrounded by others who were also rejected, gave Jephthah the opportunity to grow into a formidable leader. His ability to lead such a group demonstrated his resilience and charisma, earning him respect from those who once rejected him. When the Ammonites threatened Israel, the elders of Gilead realized that they needed someone with Jephthah's skills. They approached him with a plea: "Lead us into battle, and we will make you our head." It was a dramatic turn of events for a man who had been driven out by his own people. Jephthah, wary of their intentions, negotiated his return, agreeing to lead them only if he would be made ruler over Gilead after the victory. This moment in Jephthah's life is a powerful example of how rejection can lead to redemption. What was meant for harm, the way his family treated him, became the very reason he was sought out. It's a reminder that, in God's timing, past pains can become stepping stones toward a greater purpose. Jephthah's journey teaches us that no matter how far we've been pushed away, God can still use us in mighty ways. Jephthah's leadership wasn't just about physical strength. It was also about strategic thinking. He didn't rush into battle immediately. Instead, he tried to negotiate with the Ammonites, sending messengers to clarify Israel's right to the land. His willingness to seek peace first shows wisdom and a desire to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. But when negotiations failed, Jephthah prepared for war, knowing that sometimes peace can only come after conflict. In summary, Jephthah's story starts with rejection, but quickly transforms into a tale of leadership and redemption. His rise from an outcast to a leader reminds us of the incredible ways God can use people from all walks of life, regardless of their background or past mistakes. Jephthah's early life was a harsh reality filled with rejection and pain. Being born to a prostitute placed him on the fringes of society, especially in a culture that valued legitimate family lines. His half-brothers saw him as a threat to their inheritance and wasted no time in driving him away. This rejection by his own family deeply impacted him, yet it also served as the beginning of a journey that would shape his destiny. God often uses the most unlikely circumstances to prepare individuals for greater things, and Jephthah's early rejection was no exception. Living as an outcast, Jephthah didn't let bitterness or anger consume him. Instead, he embraced his new reality and gathered around him a group of similar outcasts, men who had also been rejected by society. This group became Jephthah's army, a band of warriors who shared a common bond of exclusion. Together, they survived the harsh wilderness, and Jephthah earned a reputation as a skilled leader and fighter. In the process, he forged himself into a man capable of leading others, even in the most dire situations. Though he had been cast out by his family, Jephthah's reputation grew, reaching even those who had once shunned him. When the Ammonites threatened Israel, the elders of Gilead realized that they needed a strong and capable leader to defend their land. Ironically, the very people who had rejected Jephthah were now seeking his help. They recognized that Jephthah's military prowess made him the perfect candidate to lead them into battle. This twist in Jephthah's life is a powerful reminder that even the worst rejections can be turned around for good. When the elders approached Jephthah, he did not immediately agree to help. He questioned their sincerity, reminding them of how they had treated him in the past. Jephthah's response wasn't just about pride. It was about ensuring that he wouldn't be used and discarded once again. He negotiated with them, ensuring that if he led them to victory, he would be made their leader. This negotiation demonstrated Jephthah's wisdom and unwillingness to be taken advantage of. Jephthah's rise to leadership didn't come through traditional means. He wasn't born into royalty, nor was he appointed by any official authority. His leadership came through his ability to survive hardship and prove his worth on the battlefield. This part of Jephthah's life serves as a powerful lesson that leadership can emerge from unexpected places, and that true leaders often come from humble beginnings. Jephthah's past, filled with rejection and hardship, was the very thing that prepared him for his future role as a leader of Israel. In conclusion, Jephthah's early life of rejection and rise to power is a testament to how God can use even the most painful experiences for a greater purpose. It teaches us that, no matter how bleak the circumstances, there is always potential for redemption and growth, especially when we rely on faith and perseverance. If you've enjoyed the video so far, comment the word vow below. I have a special blessing prayer waiting for you at the end of the video. Jephthah's journey into leadership was marked by times of great distress, both personally and for the nation of Israel. As the Ammonites continued to oppress Israel, the people found themselves desperate for a leader who could deliver them from their enemies. This sense of urgency is what drove the elders of Gilead to seek out Jephthah, the very man they had previously rejected. It's fascinating how God often brings people back into our lives just when we need them the most, and Jephthah's story is a clear example of this truth. Despite the bitterness he could have harbored, Jephthah did not turn them away. Instead, he saw this as an opportunity to step into the role he was meant for. He demonstrated immense courage, agreeing to lead the Israelites even though their intentions had been questionable in the past. This decision wasn't just about proving himself. It was about fulfilling a greater purpose that went beyond his personal vendetta. Jephthah's ability to rise above his circumstances speaks volumes about his character and his trust in God's plan. Once Jephthah took on the mantle of leadership, he didn't rush headfirst into battle. Instead, he sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites, attempting to resolve the conflict peacefully. He presented a detailed history of Israel's right to the land, showing his knowledge of the scriptures and the history of his people. This was a crucial moment, demonstrating that true leadership isn't about seeking conflict, but about finding ways to avoid it whenever possible. The king of Ammon refused to listen, and it became clear that war was inevitable. Jephthah didn't waver. He prepared his people for battle, trusting that God would guide him through the fight. This moment of preparation teaches us that, while it's important to seek peace, there are times when standing up and fighting is necessary. Jephthah's faith was unwavering, and he knew that victory wouldn't come from his own strength but from the Lord's guidance. Jephthah's leadership during this period of distress became a turning point for Israel. His willingness to take on the challenge, despite the odds, proved that he was more than just a warrior. He was a leader who could be trusted. His actions showed that true leadership requires not only courage but also wisdom, patience, and the ability to put others' needs above his own. In essence, Jephthah's journey to becoming a leader during Israel's time of distress teaches us the value of perseverance, faith, and the importance of standing up in moments of crisis. It shows that sometimes our greatest challenges can lead to our most significant victories when we trust in a higher purpose. As Jephthah prepared for battle, he made a vow to the Lord, a promise that would drastically alter the course of his life. In a moment of desperation, Jephthah declared that if God granted him victory over the Ammonites, he would offer whatever came out of the door of his house to greet him as a burnt offering. This vow, though made in faith, was spoken without fully considering the potential consequences. Jephthah's story is a cautionary tale about the weight of our words, especially when making promises to God. Jephthah's vow wasn't just an act of devotion. It was a reflection of the intense pressure he felt as a leader. He desperately wanted to ensure Israel's victory, and in his zeal, he made a pledge that he thought would guarantee God's favor. However, this vow would soon become a burden that Jephthah would regret. The Bible warns us about making rash vows, and Jephthah's story is one of the most striking examples of how a hasty promise can lead to devastating outcomes. The Lord granted Jephthah victory over the Ammonites. Israel's enemies were defeated, and Jephthah returned home a hero. But as he approached his house, his heart must have sunk. For the one who came out to greet him was not an animal or a servant, but his only daughter. This moment was a tragic twist in Jephthah's story, one that highlights the cost of making a vow without fully considering its implications. His joy at winning the battle was quickly overshadowed by the realization of what his promise meant. Jephthah's daughter, his only child, greeted him with joy, unaware of the terrible fate that awaited her. This heartbreaking scene reminds us of the unforeseen consequences of Jephthah's vow. In a time when women were often overlooked in biblical narratives, this story emphasizes the deep personal loss that Jephthah faced. It wasn't just his daughter's life that was affected, it was his entire legacy. His line would end with her, a tragic result of one rash decision. In the ancient world, a vow made to God was not something to be taken lightly. Jephthah was bound by his word, and though he was devastated, he felt compelled to fulfill his promise. His daughter, upon hearing the vow, accepted her fate with grace, requesting only 2 months to mourn her virginity in the mountains with her friends. This act of submission and sacrifice from both father and daughter underscores the weight of duty in biblical times, even when it came at such a high personal cost. Ultimately, Jephthah's vow teaches us a powerful lesson about the importance of wisdom, patience, and discernment when making promises, especially to God. It serves as a reminder that while faith is crucial, we must also be careful with our words and decisions. The consequences of a single vow changed Jephthah's life forever, and it's a story that challenges us to consider the gravity of the commitments we make. Jephthah's victory over the Ammonites was nothing short of miraculous. Against overwhelming odds, he led the Israelites to a decisive victory, securing peace for the nation. This moment should have been one of pure triumph, but it was clouded by the weight of the vow he had made. The joy of victory quickly turned to sorrow as Jephthah realized the full extent of his promise. This part of his story reminds us that even in our greatest successes, there can be consequences we did not foresee, especially when we act impulsively. As Jephthah returned home, the sight that awaited him was both joyous and tragic. His only daughter, his beloved child, came out to meet him with tambourines, celebrating his return. What should have been a moment of reunion and joy became the darkest point of Jephthah's life. The realization of his vow hit him like a wave. His victory over the Ammonites was immediately overshadowed by the personal sacrifice that now loomed before him. It was a stark reminder that the cost of victory is not always what we expect. Jephthah tore his clothes in anguish, a common expression of deep grief in the ancient world. He cried out to his daughter, revealing the vow he had made. His words were filled with despair, knowing that he had bound himself to a promise that would cost him his only child. This moment of vulnerability and anguish is one of the most poignant in the Bible, showing the heavy toll that leadership and duty can sometimes exact on a person's life. Jephthah's victory over Israel's enemies came at the expense of his own heart. The daughter's response was nothing short of remarkable. She did not react with anger or rebellion, but instead accepted her fate with grace and dignity. She understood the weight of her father's vow and, despite the tragedy, chose to honor it. Her only request was to be allowed 2 months to mourn her virginity with her friends in the mountains. This act of submission and acceptance speaks volumes about the sense of duty and sacrifice that permeates the biblical narrative, even when it comes at such a high personal cost. For Jephthah, the victory that should have brought him glory instead brought him to his knees. The tragic consequence of his vow reminds us of the power of our words and the irreversible nature of certain decisions. Jephthah's daughter became a symbol of silent sacrifice, a life cut short not by war, but by a vow made in haste. Her story is a sobering reminder that, in seeking victory or success, we must be mindful of the promises we make and the consequences that follow. In the end, Jephthah fulfilled his vow, though the Bible does not go into detail about the exact nature of the sacrifice. The focus remains on the tragic cost and the silence that followed. Jephthah's story serves as a profound lesson about the dangers of acting impulsively, especially when it comes to matters of faith and leadership. His victory, though significant for Israel, came at an immense personal price, one that would be remembered throughout history as both a triumph and a tragedy. Jephthah's story takes a dramatic turn when we reflect on the cost of keeping his vow. In biblical times, vows made to God were considered sacred, and breaking them was unthinkable. Jephthah was fully aware of the gravity of his promise and felt bound to fulfill it, no matter the personal cost. This sense of obligation reflects a deep-rooted cultural and spiritual understanding of commitment. However, Jephthah's situation reveals the complexity of faith when the fulfillment of a vow comes at such a devastating price. For Jephthah, the cost of his vow was not just the loss of his daughter but the destruction of his legacy. His daughter was his only child, and with her passing, his family line would end. In the ancient world, where lineage and descendants were of utmost importance, this was a tragedy of epic proportions. Jephthah's decision to keep his vow meant that his personal desires and hopes were sacrificed on the altar of duty and devotion. His story raises the difficult question of what it truly means to keep a promise, especially when the cost is unimaginable. In many ways, Jephthah's decision to follow through on his vow can be seen as both an act of faith and an act of sorrow. He knew that breaking a vow to God would bring even greater consequences, and so he chose the path of obedience, even though it meant personal devastation. This moment in Jephthah's life highlights the tension between faithfulness to God and the human desire for relief from suffering. It shows the depth of Jephthah's faith, but also the weight of the burden he carried. His daughter's acceptance of the vow's fulfillment is another significant aspect of the story. She did not resist or try to escape her fate. Instead, she embraced it, understanding the importance of her father's promise. Her silent acceptance is a powerful example of the sacrifices made by those who live in faith. Jephthah's daughter willingly stepped into the role of a sacrificial lamb, her life becoming a testament to the high cost of devotion. The Bible doesn't dwell on her emotional state, but her actions speak volumes about the strength required to accept such a fate. Jephthah's story also serves as a warning about making vows in moments of desperation. His initial intention was pure. He wanted to ensure victory for Israel, but the vow itself was made without considering all possible outcomes. The tragic result of this decision serves as a reminder that while faith is essential, wisdom and discernment are equally important. Promises made in haste can lead to unintended consequences, and Jephthah's life is a sobering example of this truth. In the end, the cost of Jephthah's vow was immeasurable. His story challenges us to reflect on the power of our words and the commitments we make. It reminds us that while faithfulness to God is a noble pursuit, we must also be mindful of the responsibilities and consequences that come with our promises. Jephthah's life, though marked by victory, was forever changed by the cost of keeping a vow that he made in a moment of urgency. Jephthah's daughter stands out as one of the most poignant figures in the Bible, not because of what she said, but because of what she did. The Bible doesn't record many of her words, but her actions speak volumes. When she learned of her father's vow, she did not react with anger or despair. Instead, she accepted her fate with a calm grace that is both tragic and admirable. Her willingness to become the silent sacrifice in her father's story is a testament to the power of duty and devotion in ancient times. In a society where women's voices were often marginalized, Jephthah's daughter's story takes on even more weight. She had no say in her fate, yet she approached her situation with a quiet strength that is deeply moving. The Bible tells us that she asked for 2 months to go into the mountains with her friends to mourn her virginity. This request highlights the significance of her unfulfilled life. She would never marry, have children, or continue her father's lineage. Her sacrifice was not just of her life but of the future she would never have. This act of mourning, done in the company of other women, underscores the collective grief of her situation. Jephthah's daughter was not the only one affected by her fate. Her friends and community also shared in her sorrow. The 2 months she spent in the mountains were a period of reflection, not just for her, but for all those who knew her. It's a reminder that the sacrifices we make often ripple out, affecting those around us in ways we might not expect. Jephthah's daughter became a symbol of shared grief and loss. The silent sacrifice of Jephthah's daughter also draws attention to the broader theme of duty in the Bible. Throughout Scripture, we see individuals who are called to give up everything for the sake of a higher purpose. Jephthah's daughter is one of the clearest examples of this kind of sacrifice. She gave up not only her life but her potential future, all because of a vow she had no part in making. Her story is a sobering reminder of the cost that sometimes comes with faith and duty. In many ways, the story of Jephthah's daughter is a reflection of the sacrifices that countless people make in their daily lives, often without recognition or praise. Her silent acceptance of her fate speaks to the strength required to carry out difficult tasks, even when they seem unfair. She stands as a symbol of the quiet sacrifices made by those who serve others or uphold commitments, even when those commitments come at great personal cost. Ultimately, Jephthah's daughter's life was a sacrifice that would be remembered throughout Israel's history. Her story, though brief, carries immense weight and challenges us to think about the sacrifices we are called to make in our own lives. Her silent strength reminds us that sometimes the most powerful actions are those taken without words, and that the legacy of sacrifice can resonate for generations. Jephthah's story is deeply rooted in the themes of faith and duty, two powerful forces that guided his decisions and ultimately defined his legacy. From the moment he made his vow to God, Jephthah demonstrated an unshakable belief in the importance of keeping his promises, even when it came at a great personal cost. His faith wasn't just about belief, it was about action. Jephthah understood that his duty to God outweighed even his deepest personal desires, a conviction that is central to his story. Throughout the Bible, we see examples of individuals who are called to make great sacrifices as a demonstration of their faith. Jephthah's story fits squarely into this narrative. His vow, though made hastily, was a commitment to God, and once it was spoken, he felt bound to fulfill it. This sense of duty reveals the deep reverence that biblical figures had for their promises to the Lord. Jephthah's unwavering commitment to his word, even when it meant the loss of his daughter, highlights the tension between faith, duty, and personal suffering. Jephthah's faith wasn't only tested by his vow, but also by the circumstances leading up to it. He was a man who had been rejected by his family and community, yet he still believed that God had a purpose for his life. This faith sustained him through the hardships he faced, both in battle and in his personal life. Jephthah's ability to rise above his circumstances and trust in God's plan is a powerful example of how faith can transform even the most difficult situations. The role of duty in Jephthah's life is equally significant. As a leader, he felt a responsibility not only to his people but also to God. His decision to lead Israel into battle was driven by a sense of duty to defend his nation, but his vow shows that his primary obligation was to the Lord. This hierarchy of duty, God first, then country, and finally self, shaped Jephthah's actions and decisions throughout his life. It's a reminder of the biblical principle that duty to God should always come before all else. Jephthah's daughter, too, understood the weight of duty. Her acceptance of her father's vow reflects her understanding of the importance of fulfilling promises made to God, even when they come at a personal cost. Her quiet submission to her fate shows the depth of her faith and sense of duty. This part of the story emphasizes that faith and duty often require personal sacrifice, and Jephthah's daughter serves as a powerful example of this truth. In the end, Jephthah's story is a profound meditation on the role of faith and duty in the life of a believer. It challenges us to consider how we balance our obligations to God with the demands of our personal lives. Jephthah's unwavering commitment to his vow and his daughter's acceptance of her fate teach us that true faith sometimes calls for difficult sacrifices, but it also offers the hope that those sacrifices serve a greater purpose. Jephthah's story left a lasting impact not only on his family but on the entire nation of Israel. His leadership during a time of crisis demonstrated the kind of strength and resolve that was needed to deliver the Israelites from their enemies. The victory over the Ammonites secured peace for Israel, at least for a time, and reaffirmed the importance of trusting in God's guidance. Jephthah's actions showed that even in the most difficult circumstances, God could raise up unlikely leaders to fulfill his purposes. Jephthah's vow and its tragic outcome also served as a cautionary tale for the people of Israel. His story became a reminder of the weight of making promises, especially those made to God. The seriousness with which vows were treated in biblical times was heightened by Jephthah's experience. Israel, as a community, would have seen firsthand the devastating consequences of a rash vow. This would have encouraged future generations to be more mindful of their commitments to God and others, understanding the gravity of their words. Moreover, Jephthah's story touched on the theme of personal sacrifice for the greater good of the nation. By leading Israel to victory, Jephthah ensured the safety and survival of his people, but it came at the cost of his own personal happiness and legacy. This idea of personal sacrifice for the collective good is a recurring theme in the Bible, and Jephthah's life became a powerful example of what it means to prioritize the well-being of others over oneself. His sacrifice resonated with the nation and became part of Israel's collective memory. The story of Jephthah and his daughter also sparked a tradition within Israel. In Judges 11 verses 39 to 40, it is written that the daughters of Israel would go out for 4 days each year to commemorate Jephthah's daughter. This tradition ensured that the silent sacrifice of Jephthah's daughter would not be forgotten. Her memory became a symbol of devotion, faith, and the high cost of keeping a vow. Through this annual remembrance, Israel was reminded of the importance of honoring commitments, but also of the profound personal costs that can sometimes accompany such devotion. Jephthah's legacy as a judge in Israel was marked by both victory and tragedy. He is remembered for his military success and his role in delivering Israel from their enemies, but also for the personal price he paid in fulfilling his vow. His story had a dual impact. It inspired courage and faith in the face of overwhelming odds, but it also served as a sober warning about the consequences of rash decisions. This duality makes Jephthah's story one of the more complex narratives in the Bible, offering both hope and caution. In the end, Jephthah's story became a part of Israel's history, a tale passed down through generations as a testament to the power of faith, the weight of duty, and the cost of leadership. His life, though filled with triumphs and tragedies, continues to speak to believers about the complexities of faith and the responsibilities that come with it. Jephthah's story remains a powerful reminder that leadership and faith often come with challenges and sacrifices, but through them, God's purposes are fulfilled. Jephthah's story, though set in ancient times, offers timeless lessons that resonate with us today. One of the key takeaways from his life is the importance of being mindful of the promises we make, particularly to God. In a moment of desperation, Jephthah made a vow without fully understanding its implications, and it cost him dearly. His story serves as a reminder that our words have power and that the commitments we make, especially those made in faith, carry weight. Today, we can learn from Jephthah's experience by being thoughtful and wise when making promises, ensuring that we fully consider the consequences. Another important lesson is the role of faith in facing life's challenges. Jephthah's rise to leadership, despite his humble and difficult beginnings, shows us that faith and perseverance can lead to extraordinary outcomes. Jephthah's faith in God gave him the strength to lead his people to victory, even when the odds were stacked against him. His story encourages us to trust in God's plan, even when our circumstances seem impossible. Faith is not just about belief, it's about action, and Jephthah exemplifies this through his willingness to step into a leadership role despite his past rejections. Jephthah's story also highlights the theme of personal sacrifice for the sake of a greater good. His willingness to keep his vow, even at the expense of his only daughter, is a powerful example of the cost of leadership and devotion. While this part of the story is tragic, it reflects the reality that following God's path often requires difficult sacrifices. For modern believers, Jephthah's sacrifice teaches us about the importance of prioritizing our commitments to God, even when it means making hard choices in our personal lives. The silent strength of Jephthah's daughter also speaks to us today. Her acceptance of her fate and her willingness to honor her father's vow shows a level of faith and grace that is rare and inspiring. Her story reminds us that even in moments of deep personal loss or hardship, we can still find purpose and strength in our faith. Jephthah's daughter serves as a model for how to approach life's difficulties with courage and dignity, trusting that God's plan is greater than our understanding. Jephthah's story challenges us to think about the consequences of our decisions, particularly those made in moments of pressure or fear. In our own lives, we are often faced with situations where quick decisions must be made. Jephthah's experience teaches us the value of seeking wisdom and discernment in such moments. By slowing down and considering the long-term impact of our actions, we can avoid the kind of tragic outcomes that Jephthah faced. His story calls us to be deliberate and thoughtful in our choices, especially when they involve our faith. Ultimately, Jephthah's life is a powerful example of faith, duty, and sacrifice. His story encourages us to trust in God's plan, to be mindful of the promises we make, and to recognize the cost that sometimes comes with leadership and devotion. Though his story is marked by tragedy, it also offers hope that through faith and perseverance, even the most unlikely of individuals can be used for great purposes. Jephthah's legacy lives on as a reminder of the importance of balancing faith with wisdom and the profound impact our words and actions can have on our lives and the lives of others. Jephthah's story challenges us in ways we might not expect. It's a reminder that the commitments we make, especially those to God, carry a weight that can change our lives forever. His sacrifice teaches us that faith and duty sometimes come at great personal cost, but through it all, God's purposes are fulfilled. Now, I want to ask you, how do you approach the vows and promises in your own life? What sacrifices are you willing to make in your journey of faith? As you reflect on these questions, I encourage you to stay connected to your faith and always seek wisdom in your decisions. If this story has touched you, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on more biblical insights. And before you go, let me offer a blessing for you. May the Lord guide your steps, strengthen your faith, and grant you wisdom in every decision you make. Also, don't forget to comment the word vow below. Your engagement makes a difference, and I look forward to hearing from you.